Hey, this is Matt McLean, and in this video tutorial, I'm going to show you how to do sound design in Reaper. And in this assignment, we are going to create 5 composite sounds. And what I mean by a composite is a sound that is made up of other subordinate sounds. So for this assignment, each of your composites needs to be made up of at least 2 subordinate sounds. And we're going to need at least 10 samples to make 5 composites. And I've called this assignment the Monsters versus Machines assignment, just as a way to sort of help organize the ideas and give you some direction. And what I want you to do is create 2 monster composites, 2 machine composites, and then 1 environmental backdrop composite. It's pretty open-ended, so the monster sounds can be monster vocalizations, they could be monster movement sounds, anything associated with a monster. I realized after I demoed this assignment that my monster composites are all made out of animal vocalizations, but you don't have to do that. And then as far as mechanical sounds, or machine sounds, that's pretty open-ended too. So before we get in and have a lot of fun, I'm going to approach this one a little bit differently, and we're going to start by being a little more organized than jumping in and playing with sounds right out of the gate. What I've done is I've downloaded some sounds from freesound.org, and I've noticed recently that freesound, well, 2 things. One is that sometimes it can slow down when you are downloading the sounds, and this is a bug that apparently has become a bit of a feature where periodically you'll go through periods and it just takes a while. So you have to be patient. It's probably not your system. And then the other thing is that a lot of the sounds, you definitely need to check the Creative Commons and make sure that you can use them in an educational format like this. When it's in a closed system like Canvas, it's pretty open-ended, but if you ever are going to take these sounds out into the world, you definitely need to make sure that you clear copyright, or that a lot of them have what they call attribution. So you need to give credit to the creators of the sound, which is great. I'm on board with that. But just for the sake of keeping this simple, I've downloaded these sounds that were all no copyright. So we can do anything that we want with them. And you might want to freeze this frame and just take a look at it. Dogs, moose, pigs, foxes, hydraulic hoist, bike chain, toolbox, crackling and crunching, and then there's a train station and some thunder for our ambient sounds. And then, well, let's get into Reaper and set up our assignment. So there are a couple of key steps right out of the gate, and we need to make sure that we have the right sample rate. And the rationale for this is that this sort of sound design is the kind of thing that could be used in a video project. And the standard for video projects in terms of audio sample rate is 48 kilohertz. And hopefully you've already thought about your final project. You might have some animal or monsters in your final project. And by all means, you can use this project as a larger sandbox to create some of the sounds that you use down the line. You might save yourself some time and kill 2 birds with 1 stone. But let me show you how to set that. You can always see what the sample rate in the project is in the top bar here. You can see this is 48 kilohertz, 24-bit wave. If you go to options and then down to preferences, if you go to audio and device, you can check the box to request a sample rate. And in this case, it's 48 kilohertz. So I'm good to go. If you change it, you need to hit apply. This is grayed out because that's already done here. And I'm just going to cancel that. And then there's another place, there's this little eye here. And this is if you hover over it, it tells you what it is, project settings. So if you click on this, the project sample rate could potentially be 44.1. If you click on the drop down, there are actually a bunch of different options. But it will only set the project sample rate if you click this box. So make sure that either this box is not selected, or if you do select the box, you change that sample rate over to 44.1. And then I'm actually just going to close that because I know I'm where I need to be at 48 kilohertz. And then the other couple of things that I want to go over is really before you get started, let's add a couple of effects onto the master track. One of them is the Kakos Recomp, that I've suggested in the past, but I think this is really essential for this project just because you will have a lot more sounds going on. And what we're going to do is set it to a really subtle setting, and that's the master bus glue, because we are on the master track here. And you can see the compression setting here, the ratio is really only 1.5 to 1. So it's really doing very mild compression. And this just helps bring the sounds together and help them gel in the mix. And then the other one that we have been adding is the JS master limiter. And if you scroll down, I'm on a Mac here, so it's a vertical list. I know PCs sometimes display this as 4 or 5 columns, so you might have to scroll over, but it is in alphabetical order. So you go with that master limiter, and we're going to go with the default setting where the threshold is -3 dB. And then I'm going to do something crazy. I'm actually going to disengage these. For now, I'm going to come back to that in a minute. Well, not in a minute, but when I'm done with the project, I'm going to turn them back on. But the rationale for that is that you definitely want to get your mix going without this help, if possible. It's easy to fall into a trap. You might have sounds that are distorting. They might not be overloading if you have the master limiter on, but they could be changing the overall mix drastically. So I think it, just as a general rule of thumb, it helps to get your mix as good as possible without the help. And then we'll come back to that later, and I'm going to show you how to do this with a little reminder when we save our project. So I'm going to save this in 2 seconds here. But what I've already done is set up an assignment folder here, and I've called it my last name, assignment 7. And in this folder, I've already created some subfolders just to keep things organized. So I have some monster sounds, some machine sounds, some environmental sounds, and I'm going to put these downloaded sounds into them first before I drop them into my project. But before I forget, I'm going to save this Reaper project into that folder as well. So I'm going to go to File, Save As, and then I'm going to call it Remember Master McLean Assignment 7. And let's make sure we're putting this in the right spot. This one is the McLean Assignment 7 folder, and I'm going to click on this and make sure that you have your Copy All Media project on, just in case you forget and you do a Save As at the end. This will copy things into your project folder. But we're going to try to circumvent that common problem by dropping everything into the project folder first before we get started. So I'm going to hit save, and then let's double check this, and sure enough, it's in here. And then again, what I'm going to do before I bounce this out, I have this remember in here to remember to turn my master effects back on before I export my final project. So now what I'm going to do is go to my downloaded sounds. This is, sorry, kind of boring project management, but this is the kind of stuff that's really going to save you time and heartache down the line. So on my monster sounds, I'm just going to resize this window, and I can do several here: moose, dogs, pigs, foxes. And I'm going to hold down Option, so I'm just going to copy them into my monster sounds. And then let's see, I have my hydraulic hoist, bicycle tools, and crackling sounds. Again, I'm holding down Option, and I'm going to copy these into my machine sounds. And then I have my 2 environmental sounds here, and I'm going to copy those into the environmental sounds folder. And now I can close that up, and I'm ready to start dropping sounds into the project. So let's start with some monster sounds first. Let's see. I think one of the first ones that I did in my demo here, and when I say did, I actually have several saved versions of demos for this assignment, just so we can save time and I can show you things at various stages of completion. But I'm going to drag the dog sound in here, and I'm going to drag the pig sound in here. So we're going to combine a dog and a pig. And we'll close that up, and almost ready to get started here. So before I do anything more, I'm actually going to add a track. And if you go into tracks, you can insert a new track or use the key command. I'm going to be using the key command for the rest of this project, and that is Command T. So let's click out here. I do a Command T and it dropped it right below whatever one I had selected. But you can move these around. You just grab the track and drag it up. So I have this blank track up above here. And the reason why is because I'm going to use this foldering system that I went over briefly in my Getting Started in Reaper back in a previous module. But over on the left-hand side, if you click on the little folder, click the plus, it will suddenly bump whatever's down below it into that folder. And then these all have folder things too. If you click on them, you can put folders within folders, or if you click on it again, it'll bump this file out. But actually, I want both of these sounds to be in here. And this is kind of cool. I'll expand this a little bit. And you can see that one of these sounds, the pig grunt, was a mono track. And then the dogs were apparently stereo. So you can see the composite up here in the top. And then I'm going to give this track a name. Dogs, pigs, let's call it Pog. There's my composite that is getting started. And then, well, you can see there's kind of different sound sources here. It looks like my pig is like a really short sound, and my dog sounds, there are a number of woofs or roughs that are spread out over time. So that's kind of a problem. What I'm going to do is trim this down. And so try to get them on the same page. But notice that before I really start editing, you should probably turn your snap to grid off here. And what that'll do is let you move things seamlessly here. So let me tell you why we've created this composite. One of the reasons why is you can put effects, sort of like a master, it's almost like a bus effect on both of these sounds. And you can add automation. So since this is a composite, and in our imagination, this composite is a single unified sound from a single unified monster, we would probably want to be doing our volume and pan automation on the same thing. So this creates this sort of global folder automation and effects options, so you can control things that are in the folder. And that is a great way to get started. But let me show you what I think the best way to work on this project is, before I do any audio editing, is to create another new track. And I'm going to put this one down below. And I'm going to bump this one out. Oops. Bump it out here. And I'm going to create another new track and another new track. And what I'm going to do is go back and do my assignment. And I'm going to drop the other sounds in here. So I got the dog and the what was it? The pig. So now I need to get the moose elk. So I'm going to drag this down here, one below the blank one, the moose elk, and then the fox cry I'm going to drag in here too. And if I click back in this, that offline thing goes away. And then I'm going to put these ones into a folder, and I'm going to call this, I don't know, the Felk something for now. That's our working title. But what I would do is drag all of your sounds into your project folder first before you do any editing. And this is a way of compartmentalizing your workflow and working more efficiently. It's really easy to get in and start playing with sounds and just get lost in the creative process. And then you only have like one or two sounds, and you might forget to add one of your composites in. And the way to avoid that problem is don't do any editing yet, just drop all of your sounds in. So you should have 10 sounds in the project. And then I'm going to show you some new tools in Reaper, or tools that are new to us, that will help you do sound design and create these composites. So I am going to open up another project here. This is essentially what your project is going to look like. I've muted these just for now because I'll unmute them as I go through and work. Let's say I should probably have these composites muted. Scrolling down, I'm just going to mute that too. So you can see I have 5 composites, Pox, the Barselk, I guess my working title was short-lived there. So I've changed that. There's the crunch box, which is a crunching sound and a toolbox, and then a hydraulic pane, which was a bike chain and a hydraulic press. And then the thunder and a train station down at the bottom. So you can see this is at a minimum in terms of how many tracks you have. This is what I need to see. I need to see your 5 composites. And you can see that I have my master plugin, my master track plugins here. I should probably disengage those again, just to be sure. Again, in my track title, it still says Matt Remember, so I don't forget to turn those on later. But really, now we're ready to get in and start doing some fun editing. So let me show you how to get started here. I want to make sure I'm doing the right one. Oh, this is under my sandbox. So, I think the Pox is probably the one I should start with. Okay, so I'm going to unmute this, and then I'm going to sample these. Looks like I didn't mute my crunch box. I recognize that sound. So now these are all muted. So a fox cry and a pig, and really what I want to do is I just want one pig sound and one fox. So I'm going to peel my fox back here and peel it from the other side here, and then I'm going to slide it towards the beginning. Whoops. Grab it in the middle here, and I'm going to move my pig sound over, and I'm using just the pinch on my trackpad to get these closer to the beginning of the song here. Well, not really a song, but let's see, where are we? Right at the beginning, 0 up in the time counter here. Oh, here's another trick. You don't need to see the measures. So under view, if you go down to time unit for ruler, you can change this to minutes and seconds so you don't see the measures. And this makes it a little bit more clear just in your little transport here, where you are in the song. And so the first thing in terms of sound design is getting a balance between these two sounds and having them start in a way that is cohesive. And a lot of times different sounds have different transients, the way they start at the impulse at the beginning of the sound. So you might want to use the impulse of one of the sounds and then maybe more of the tail of the other. So you might want the fox cry to come a little bit before the pig grunt sound comes in, and then have the tail be the pig, for example. So let's see how that sounds. Not quite lined up, but yeah, that might be a little better. But there are some other really useful tools. So you can still see like the fox is kind of short and the pig is kind of long. And we know things from the past. You can do this fade tool where you can shorten the track and fade out the pig. You could maybe do that a little more extreme. But there's some great tools in Reaper that we haven't played with. So one of them is, well, you can always reverse them. So I'm actually going to reverse this, and that might be kind of cool. And you can see, you can switch back and forth between the non-reversed and the reverse version. So whatever one is lit up is the non-reverse version. So now I'm gonna have to move this over. So that might be fun. Let's hear how that sounds. Ooh, that's like kind of a cool, I don't know, creepy ghost sound. Or the other cool tool, I'm gonna undo these moves and just go back to original. Okay, so there is this other really cool tool where you can stretch the piece of audio. And what you want to do is put your cursor somewhere in the middle of the waveform. And then if you go to item and then stretch marker, you go add stretch marker at cursor. And I'm going to put my cursor right here. It's kind of hard to see. You might want to zoom in on this, but there are a couple little triangles. And if you hover over them, you'll see that you can start moving things around. And you can, and it splits into two triangles. Let's move these. There you go. Now you can see the two triangles. So like this blue one on this side, if I move it, it will stretch the tail end of it. If I move the red one, it'll stretch the beginning of it. I'm actually not looking at the whole waveform. There's one way over here, so you can stretch the entire thing somewhat. So like if my fox cry was too short, I can make it longer. And this doesn't change the pitch. Let's listen to it. Woo, that was kind of cool. There's sort of a weird ring at the end of it where, I don't know, it's doing some stretching on the reverb, natural reverb. But it's sort of like silly putty, where you start to play and you can morph these sounds. You can add multiple stretch markers. There's a key command for it. It's Shift W. So I can put one here, and then I can start stretching and pulling from this side. I could maybe add another one over here and stretch and pull this. Probably a little bit too much. And if you have done too much, you can go back into item and go into your stretch markers, and then let's see, if you go down to stretch markers in selected items, you go to remove, and we can go back to the beginning. So go play with that. That's an amazing tool. And then let's see, don't fall too far down that rabbit hole, because you could spend your whole life playing with the silly putty. But for one of your composites, I definitely think you need to get in and play with that tool. It might not be essential for your sounds, depending on what they are. And then I'm going to show you another really cool effect that is really useful on this project. So I'm going to put an effect on here and go back to Kakos, and that's the ReaPitch. And this is something we use the pitch back on the audio advertisement. You could maybe pitch your voice up or down a little bit, but this has a lot more fine control than the one over in Audacity. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a little loop here, and I'm just going to drag up in the time bar here, and you can see it made this little gray box. And then I'm going to turn the cycle thing, looks like a little washing machine over here. So now when I play, it'll play that over and over again. And then before that drives us all crazy, I'm going to get in and start moving these sliders. And this is one of the great things about Reaper that you can't do in Audacity, is you can get in and start auditioning sounds and playing with sliders in real time and hear how they affect the sound. So what I'm trying to do here is maybe match that fox cry to the pig, because the pig sounds lower in pitch, and I kind of want the fox to be maybe in the same ballpark. Maybe. Sometimes having them wildly different can be effective too, where you have one filling out the high end and one filling out the low end. That can be done with EQs. It can also be done with this pitch shifting tool. So enough of me talking, let's listen, and you just watch me move the sliders. Okay. This one's really subtle. And then the octaves is really drastic. The formant, okay, so that was the actual shift to the fundamental frequency. The formant is sort of like the overtone series and the bright overall brightness. So maybe like maybe the size of the voice box, not the length of the vocal cords. So let's give this one a listen. Okay, so hours of fun there. And some of the cool things, I actually like the way it sounded when I was moving it. So you can always get in here and play with automation. Under trim. So you can see now that I have that effect on here, I can use that formant shift. I'm just going to click on, kind of like that last one. And let's zoom in on this a bit more. And this is just like volume or pan automation, but I'm going to do some wild stuff with my paintbrush here. to varying degrees of success. So anyway, yeah, those are some great things. So you can stretch the sound, you can morph it, pretty much anything that your imagination can think of. So without wasting time fumbling around in the dark here on all of these other sounds, I'm actually going to pull up a couple of examples and just sort of walk you through how I approached them when I was sandboxing my composites for the final project here. So I'm going to go in, this is one I just called it Pox, and I'll show you what I did. So this is just a single composite, and it's the same two source sounds, the pig and the fox. And I did some work. You can see these little arrows here. So I stretched out the end of it, and then I added a fade on that track. Let's see, I don't have an effect on that one. That's the pig grunt. So I did some stretching on the pig, and then I did some stretching on the fox cry along with some automation. And you can see in the trim lane which one I had engaged. It's that same one. Well, it's the first formant shift. And so I painted in some wild activity in there. And let's see. And it looks like I put an effect on the overall thing. I put the ReaVerberate effect on the folder, so that puts some reverb on both of them, and that can help smear the sounds together. When you're in the reverb, and ReaVerberate, the reverb plugin requires you to load some IRs, and it doesn't have as many sliders that you can affect it with. So I definitely recommend using the ReaVerberate. It's just a pretty good reverb, and you can dampen the tail of the reverb. You can change the size of it. You can change the width. This can be a good way to sort of match the width of different sounds if you're adding reverbs on individual tracks. The pre-delay is how long it takes for the initial reflections to get to you. And then the low pass and high pass filters, the low pass actually rolls off the high end. So you can see everything above 3602 hertz has been jettisoned, and then the low frequencies have been jettisoned. And this is a good way to sort of smear the reverb and make it a little bit less obvious, so it's more about the source sounds, and you're really just kind of gluing it all together. So let's give it a listen and see how it sounds. Yeah, wow, completely different than the other one. So you can really hear the pig grunt and the squeal starting to go wild there. Let me show you another one. But before I do, there's another move. Now that let's call this done. Say I'm done with this, my Pox, and that is that we are going to render this composite, because what I'd like to be able to do, and what you're going to need to do for this project, is you're going to have to copy your this Pox into other places in the project down within a minute. You could use it once if it's an epic sound, and it really, I don't know, helps tell your story, but it could be making the sound repeatedly. And the cool thing is you can add additional layers of automation in terms of volume, or that pitch shift can be really cool once you render this and then copy it over. So what you do is you click on the folder track, and then you go to track, and then here we're going to go down to render freeze, and I'm going to render tracks to stereo stem tracks and mute the originals. So let's just click on that. It did a little math there, and it's created this new track above it, and notice it added this mute, and now we have this cool composite here. And the awesome thing is now I can click on it, copy it, and I can paste it anywhere I want in the document. And why that might be cool is that I can now add an additional layer of effects to it. Let's say I wanted to, well, there are a couple of things. Let's say I wanted to add that pitch sound again. And this one, I could add some automation on maybe the fundamental frequency. And I think that was shift here. So I could have, earlier, maybe it's a sort of growling, and then the later ones, I'm going to put another point over here, it raises in pitch. So let's go back to the beginning and preview that. Sorry, I need to turn that on. Let's try that one more time. So we've done all this work to create a single composite, but it doesn't have to just be that one sound. You can add this cool other layer. And this is really where this project comes to life, is when you add some additional layers of automation. So enough of our pox. I'm going to get rid of it. And I think, what was the other one that I did? Oh, the bar Selk. And this is with some stem edits. So this one I added some cool things you might check out. And what I've done to this one is I added some effects here. So if you go to the pitch, I added a pitch and some reverb to the whole thing. And let's see, if you go to trim, it'll show you what I did. Oh, I did pretty much the same thing I just showed you. I added that shift of pitch. I did it maybe just a little bit more artfully here. So let's give this one a listen. And let's see, actually I'm going to scroll down and see what did I do to the original tracks. It looks like I added some EQ. Oh, so here's an interesting move. This one, I'm going to unmute. I'm actually going to mute this and show you what I did here. So this is the dogs and the moose, and I have a couple dogs, and I used a little volume automation on the 2 dog barks, and on the moose I boosted the low end, and on the dogs looks like I changed the pitch here. So I turned it down. So let's give this one a listen. Yeah, that was my composite. And then let's hear what happened when I added the formant shift automation. Oh, and I'm looking in here now, and I realize what I did that was cool is I added some additional stretching. So notice these are different lengths. Initially, they were all the same size, but I stretched them out in different ways. So some are longer and some are shorter. And I got like 5 different cool sounds of my mulk. Let's hit play. Yeah, so woo, all sorts of cool stuff. I'm not going to save that. Let me show you what I did with the mechanical sounds. Let's go to the hydraulic pane. This is the hydraulic press and the bike chain. Super proud of this one. What I did with this one is I actually cut the hydraulic press in half because it was way too long. And the bike chain was like a minute long too. And I shortened it using these calipers, and I really had to nail it down to the exact number of clicks in the bike chain. And I'm going to actually play it for you first and then show you where it came from, because it's pretty drastically different. And then this one, the bike chain, I added a really far out EQ. I boosted the low end way up because it's such a high, annoying sound. You know, that bike chain spinning, the freewheel spinning. And I tried to get rid of some of the high frequency. So it made it sort of hyper real. And let's give it a listen. So there's this little clink at the end of the hydraulic press, and it kind of matches right up with the bike chain. So I'm gonna click down here and do my little track add move, and I'm gonna bump this out. I don't want it in the composite. And I'm gonna copy this over here, copy this audio object, and I'm going to stretch it out. You can see what it actually looked like. It was this gigantic long track here. And so what I did is I really had to zip it back because it was just way too long. And I'm going to get rid of that. And then with this homemade hydraulic press, it was even longer. I'll show you what this one was. So this one, woo, super long. You gotta zoom way out. it was two just really long iterations of, oh, it looks like it's repeating. I think I gotta move it over. Oh, and unzip the beginning. I took some stuff off the beginning. So I'm gonna solo this out and we can hear what the original was. Looks like something else is soloed. Whoop, of course. Turn that off. So there was some talking at the beginning that I got rid of.
Homemade hoist. Homemade hoist.
Oop, and I gotta turn my little cycle looper off. It's like having your teeth drilled on. But it was way too long. So to shorten it, I used this cool tool. I went to item and then split at cursor. So there's a key command for that, and that's a pretty obvious one. It's S. And so when you do that, you can, you can cut them in half and then peel things back. And the cool thing is you can actually delete one and then re-peel it back. It's still there. It's not destructive editing like Audacity was. So I do this all the time. You can make multiple cuts and then do all sorts of fun stuff to each individual object, or you might just want to use a little piece of it. And then if you ever need to glue something back together, you can hit Shift and select two items and it'll highlight both of them. And there isn't a key command for this. You actually have to go down and glue, and that'll glue those back together. So that is what I did with that one. Let me show you this last one, and then we'll jump into an almost finished product. So I'm going to not save that one. So that was the bike chain, hydraulic pane, the crunch box, and see what I did with the crunch box. I think I used some creative EQs on this one. So let's just demo it first. We'll go back to the beginning. So I did some, actually reversed, I cut off the beginning and put it over at the end, and you can see because there are these two shaded sections, I added a reverse version and then stretched it out. So all sorts of wild stuff, and then added some fades and crossfades to the toolbox clutter. And then the cracking sounds, I had it fade out. And then in terms of effects, I put this big bump at what is it? At 1 kilohertz on this one, and then I added a little cut on this one just to make them blend better. I kind of want them to be sort of, well, coming from the same sound. So here, I'm actually going to solo this cracking crunching and loop it, and you can hear how that EQ effect really changed the sound. So there's the crunch. Let me turn my cycle on here. And if I turn it off, it's more annoying and high-pitched. But I added some more of that sound that I felt worked better with the toolbox clutter. And these sounds worked really well together because one was mono and one was stereo. If you have two mono sounds, it can work well for a sound that is off in the distance, but sounds that are close to you tend to sound more stereo. You can add some reverb on them. There are other creative ways to make them sound more three-dimensional. But when you're looking for your primary source sounds, definitely try to get some stereo sounds in there, so it doesn't sound like it's just right up the middle. Okay, so there are my 4 composites. Those are the 2 creatures and 2 comforts, or 2 machines. Let's quit and let's go into. Don't want to save that. Let's go into a version that is a little bit further down the line here, and let's see. Well, I guess this is the one where I actually started to distribute the sounds. So we'll go into my final version here. Maybe not the final version, but getting pretty darn close. So what I want to show you here is my environmental sounds down at the bottom. And I'm going to solo these out and show you a couple cool moves for making your final product exactly 1 minute. So notice that I changed the time view under view to time and ruler to, what was it? Minutes and seconds. That made it easier. And then I turned my snap to grid back on. And the reason why is, I'm going to put my cursor later in the tune here, is when you drag sounds, you can have it be right at 1 minute. So if you don't have this on, it's really kind of a pain to make everything exactly a minute. It's really easy to be off a little bit and have your product be a minute and 1 second or a minute and 2 seconds. So if you turn your snap grid on after you've distributed everything, that can help you finish up things on the right margin. Okay, I'm going to turn that back off. And let's just solo out these environmental sounds. So what it was a let's see, distant thunder and a train station. And so I didn't put any effects on them because they were already stereo tracks, you can see, because I have 2 lines. I really just added this the slider here, and let's go back to the beginning. Whoops, I did a fade at the beginning. So I really got to zoom out here. So this Paddington Station sound was really long. It went on for a couple minutes. I had to peel that one back. And then this other one, this Distant Thunder, was only like 20 seconds. So this one I had to pull, and it's basically an auto loop function. This was the length of the wave, and I just peeled it back like this. So there was some more talking on the Paddington Station one at the beginning that I didn't really want getting in the way of my cool monsters. So I faded this track in the beginning. So you don't need to add effects and automation to everything, but you need to have effects and automation somewhere in here. Every composite needs to have something, some effect, some automation. Obviously, it just is too much if you try to pan everything and turn into the 1 million armed octopus controlling everything. But let's just preview this. I'm going to go back to the beginning, and you can hear the train station sort of fade in, and lets you sort of wrap your head around the thunder sounds. Yeah, so I might need to turn that down when I get these other sounds in here. Notice that's why we have the foldering, is I can just turn all of my ambient sounds down together with a single slider. And you can automate it and add effects. So that was my cool backdrop. It doesn't have to be outdoors. I was just kind of going for this, dystopia. But it could be an inside space. You might want to use some room tones, like it could be happening in an office. It could be in a factory. You name it. It could be in a library. It can be a quiet environment. You don't have to have monsters screaming and yelling and doing all sorts of crazy stuff. But anyway, this is what I've done. So I've done these. I bounced out these stems, and you can tell when you do that move where you freeze the track, and we did that over here, render freeze. It actually calls it a stem with this little line after it. So and then it muted all the source sounds down below. So my stems here, I distributed, and I added a bunch of automation. You can see it tells you what it's doing. I did the low end, I did some of the high end, and then I changed the shift and the format. Kind of old tricks, but let me walk you through what I was thinking. So with the low and the high shelf, what I did is I let one monster cry happen in the beginning, and then I rolled off all the low end and the high end. And the rationale is sounds that are more distant tend to be more constrained in terms of the harmonic information, the frequency spectrum information. The environment tends to eat up low and high frequencies before the mid peaks come through. So I was trying to make it sound more distant and then sort of come back into the mix. And as it did that, I also lowered the pitch, and just to change it so you're not hearing the same pox over and over again. So those are the 4 moves I made down there. If you scroll down, I did some other fades on these other tunes. And so the hydraulic pane I felt sounded sort of like a walking, some sort of robot. That's what I was thinking. So you hear a couple moves in the beginning, and then it gets faster, and then it sounds like footsteps. And then what I did is I faded it out a little bit, but I really rolled off the high end just to kind of take it out of the mix and make it sound like the footsteps were getting further away. And yeah, that's sort of my project as it stands right now, is like a minute. Let's just give it a quick listen. And then, one step, because I'm going to export this, remember that I called it the master track. Make sure you turn on the compressor and the limiter before you do your final mix down. So let's make sure that I didn't have anything soloed out that I didn't want. So notice on this last track, I didn't create a freeze. You can really just have this, because you're not really going to be repeating these sounds. I just kept this as a single folder. Whoop. So let's give it a listen and have some fun. Okay, there's my fun project. Maybe I heard too many of these sounds in here, so this is a good time to let it sit for a day and then maybe pull some sounds out and then bounce it out. So now I need to render it. So I'm going to go to File, Render, and you can do a time selection. So within a custom time range, this is a way to make it exactly 1 minute long. So you could make it boop, like that. So start at 0 and be 1 minute. That's a good way to not make a mistake. And then we're going to do this as a wave at 24 bits, and then let's render it. Oops. Great. We'll close that. I forgot one thing. I didn't put it in the right spot. So I'm going to re-render that. Because where did I put it? Oh yeah, so I put it in my 7 final. Okay, so I need to go find that, just because that was one of my practice moves here. So it's right here. This is my track. I'm just going to hit spacebar to check to make sure it plays. And that it's 1 minute long, so look at the end of it. Yep, exactly 1 minute. And then I just need to make sure that I put that into my assignment folder here. Boop. So you might find that you have your stems when you bounce each of your individual composites. You might have the repeaks in here from your stems. That's fine. You don't have to have it as clean as this one is here, but just make sure that you do have all of your source sounds, your monster sounds and environmental sounds in here. You can see, because I was doing various amounts of work, this one has all the repeaks, the temp files. But we're pretty much ready to wrap this up and ship it off to me. Again, make sure that your master limiter and that recomp are in there. Boop. And then there's a checkbox on them if they are indeed on. And have fun with this project. I would spend a lot of time on 1 or 2 of the sounds and then maybe move a little quickly on the other ones. And the rationale for having you do multiple ones is each different source sound really presents different obstacles and fun opportunities. So I just want you to sort of try on different hats with the automation and effects, and definitely keep your final project in mind. And who knows, maybe one day you'll be doing your own sound design and making money.